Hi, we're Brecken and Jonathan Farnsworth of Parle, second generation owners and a husband and wife team. We've been married for 12 years, and during that time we went and got our gemology degrees in Thailand and had two beautiful daughters, 4-year-old twin girls.
Opal is really the heart of Parle. My dad started as a hobbyist opal miner in Spencer, Idaho in 1973. And that really is how we got our start into the colored stone industry. Slowly over the years, we've transitioned that into manufacturing with 19 employees here in Pocatello, Idaho, and doing most of our manufacturing right here. We've won a lot of awards, mostly because of Brecken, in our designs, and we really are a leading manufacturer and gem dealer in the colored stone world.
Parle means to speak, and that sentiment encompasses everything we do here. When we buy a gemstone or design a piece of jewelry, it has to speak to us in 3 terms: beauty, rarity, and value. For over 50 years, we've carried on the time-honored traditions of craftsmanship and service. We believe that jewelry tells a story, and we are so proud and honored to be a part of that story.
Today we wanted to talk to you about opal. And opal is the only gemstone that can have every color of the rainbow in a single stone. And I think Pliny the Elder said it best: "For in them you shall see the living fire of the ruby, the glorious purple of the amethyst, the sea green of the emerald, all glittering together."
The most amazing thing about opal is that it's a phenomenal gemstone, and its phenomenon is called play of color. And that's those rolling flashes of color that you see throughout the gemstone.
Opal is formed by silica spheres, and those silica spheres, the stacking or arrangement is what causes that play of color. So if you looked under high magnification, it would be like a bunch of marbles in a shoebox. So if they're all stacked up properly, that's how you get the play of color. And then the size of the spheres is what gives you the different colors. So the largest spheres are red and the smallest spheres are blue with all the other colors in between.
Yeah, and the cool thing is it actually breaks light. So when light enters an opal, it wraps around the sphere and breaks the light into its spectral color.
Compared with the other gemstones that just refract light, it actually breaks it.
Light. Boom! Today we want to cover 5 types of opal that we sell here at Parle. The first is called light opal. The second, black. Then we have Boulder, Doublet, and Mexican fire opal.
The first 4 types primarily come from Australia, and they come from a sedimentary process. The eastern part of Australia is an ancient seabed, and so that's why you get lots of fossils and opal replacements, which is really cool.
Yeah, we use a lot of those opal fossils in a lot of our pendants and earrings. So you might unknowingly own an opal fossil in one of our pieces of jewelry, which I think is super cool. The 5th opal mentioned is Mexican fire opal, and that opal comes from, well, Mexico, and it was formed in a volcanic process, different from the Australian opal.
The first type of opal is what we call light opal. Some people call it white opal, but we like to call it light because not all of it is white in the higher qualities. It comes primarily from southern Australia, especially from Cougar Pedy, which in Aborigine means white man in a hole. And light opal has a lighter base color, and it's the most traditional.
The next is black opal, and the most famous source of black opal is Lightning Ridge, Australia. We call black opal the queen of all opals because she commands the highest price tag in her finest form. Now that black base color is due to iron in the opal, which gives a nice, beautiful dark base color to reflect that gorgeous play of color off.
The third type is Boulder Opal, which primarily comes from Queensland, Australia. And Boulder Opal is still attached to its host rock, which is ironstone, which is like a petrified sandstone. And it often has an undulated surface and often shows the host rock face up on the stone, which is okay, but not as desirable as a full opal face. It is probably the most difficult of the opals to cut because the seams of opal are quite thin. And the opal cutters call it chasing the fire. So that's why you often have that uneven surface.
Opal doublet is an assembled gemstone. And so what we mean by that is we take a very thin slice of opal that would be unusable on its own and affix it to an ironstone backing. So what it does is it mimics black opal and Boulder opal, giving that opal a really nice base color. You can usually tell the difference because it's a very thin, flat gemstone. And what this does is it gives your customers a great entry price point into the world of opal.
The last type of opal that we carry at Parle is Mexican fire opal, which typically has a base color that is yellow, red, or orange. The red is often called cherry opal. The other interesting thing about Mexican fire opal is that it is formed by volcanic rather than sedimentary process, and therefore only about 30% of it has play of color. The rest just has a nice red or orange color just all on its own.
So just a few facts about the history of opal. Opal was really popularized by the Romans about 2,000 years ago, and at this time it was mined in Hungary. Now those mines have since been depleted, and in modern times, opal was really popularized by Queen Victoria. Now she loved the gemstone, and during her reign there just happened to be a large discovery of opal in Australia.
With opals, there's several questions that we get asked. The first one is opal unlucky? And I think this really started with jewelers not being used to working with opal, and they were used to things that were much harder. And so, opal is the same hardness as glass. So if you think of a picture frame that you can snap it very easily versus a car windshield, it's much more difficult. So we tend to use opal in pendants and earrings that's thinner and rings that are a bit thicker.
Right, and so think about it like this. When people first started setting opal, they didn't know how to work with it. And so jewelers would often say, oh, it's an unlucky stone. It's not my fault that the gemstone broke, it's just an unlucky stone. I think we can tie a lot of this unlucky or cursed opal to a book written by Sir Walter Scott called Anne of Gerstein, and he wrote it in 1828, and this was a bestseller. Think Harry Potter, think Twilight. This was a massive hit. And in this book, there was a story about a woman named Hermione, and she wore a gorgeous opal, but people thought she had bewitched her husband, who was a rich lord. And when their son went to the church to be baptized, they threw holy water on the opal, it cracked, she crumbled to the floor, and then she disappeared forever. So that's kind of how opal got tied with being cursed or being unlucky.
So when we talk about how fragile is an opal, I think a lot of the problems with cracking and crazing that happened in the 70s when the miners would pull the opal out of the ground and keep it in water, and then the cutters kept it in water, and then the dealers kept it in water. And then once it was finally set into jewelry and went to the consumer, a lot of the stones would crack and craze. So they found out that this was really bad for the name of opal.
Yeah, the industry as a whole.
Yeah, the industry as a whole. And so then the miners said, well, if we can't sell opal, it's no good at all. So they started taking it out and leaving it out in the hot sun in the desert of Australia.
Yeah.
And then the cutters would even take it a step further and a lot of times take the rough, and you'd see these little
ovens. Like easy bake ovens.
Yeah, easy bake or toaster ovens that they would turn them up to 250 degrees and let it cook for a little while, just so that anything that would crack or craze would do it there and not once it was in the piece of jewelry.
Right, and we as a company have a guarantee that our opal will not crack or craze naturally. Unfortunately, we can't guarantee that if you drop a stone or it breaks because you smashed it in a door or something like that, but we take great care when we're purchasing our opal that we make sure it's of the highest quality to prevent those nasty cracks or crazes.
Another question that we often get asked is care of opals, and the thing that always comes up is, should I oil my opals?
No.
Please don't oil your opals. Opals generally aren't porous, and so all that happens is that you get that oil layer on the surface of the opal, and then it collects dust, which dust is primarily quartz, which is harder than opal, and so it just scratches and abrades the surface of the opal. So for care, if you want to clean your opal, just a soft toothbrush and soapy water. And then for storing it, just store your jewelry like you would everything else in a jewelry box is great. The only time with oil that would even make sense is if you had loose opals and you wanted to put them in a safety deposit box. But even then, water works just fine for the most part, and most people don't have loose opals that they need to store. So that's how to take care of your opal.
So the one type of opal that we haven't talked about, which is really popular on the market today, is Ethiopian opal. Now there was a huge discovery of Ethiopian opal in 2008 in Lello. And we chose not to carry this opal because most of it, or some of it, is hydrophane. Now what hydrophane means is that it is porous, think of it like a pumice stone, and it will absorb water. And when it absorbs that water, it loses its play of color. Now it could come back if you leave it for a few days or weeks. That water will eventually evaporate and you can get that play of color back. But what if you dropped it in a glass of red wine? What if you dropped it in coffee? It's going to absorb the color from that, and that's something that won't be removed from the stone.
Cool. And it's not just dropping it in something. I mean, a lot of times people are like, why don't I drop my jewelry in that? It has more to do with your skin naturally has oils and lotions and perfumes, and a lot of those perfumes are dyed. So we've seen a lot of jewelry, unfortunately, that has gotten dyed or discolored due to...
Yeah, it can turn a really interesting, and I say interesting, color of yellow when it absorbs body oils and lotions like that. So we're not saying that every piece of Ethiopian is going to do this, but in our situation, we just chose not to carry it as a company because we do offer that guarantee against cracking and crazing. And hydrophane material is more likely to crack or craze as well. We want to thank you so much for tuning into our presentation on opal today. If you'd like to learn a little bit more, you can always check out our podcast, Gem Junkies. Jonathan and I have a little podcast that talks about all different gemstones. You can also check out our website, www.parlegems.com. Or you can check out our Instagram or Facebook pages at Parle Gems. Thanks everyone, have a great day.